Afternoon, Maz.
Hello.
Hi, we're live.
Oh, we are live. Oh, I did not know that. We have everyone now.
We are. We're ready to go.
Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to our webinar, Advancing Learning with Google for Education, AI and Chromebooks in Abu Dhabi. My name is Mazen Abdallah. I'm the head of Google for Education for Middle East, North Africa. And I'm excited to have all of you here as we dive into how we are advancing learning with Google for Education technology. So it's time for some introductions. First of all, Duncan, a close friend and a customer at the same time. And he's the assistant head digital pedagogy, innovation, and safety at the British School in Al Khubairat. So, Duncan, can you tell us about the school and how long you have been using Google for Education?
Hi, Maz. Good to speak to you again. Yeah, we're a non-for-profit school, and for those of you that know BSAC, it's over 50 years old, so it's actually older than UAE itself. And we're a pretty large school. We've got 2,100 students across K12. I think more importantly, we're non-for-profit. We're non-selective, and obviously we've got the ties with the British Embassy. So the big thing for us, obviously, because we're such a large school, is that element of consistency.
Awesome. And regarding technology, which we are discussing today, where did you start? I understand you weren't always a Google school.
Yeah, that's right. And around about 2018, we switched over to become a Google school. And at that point in time, we were a BYOD, so bring your own device school. And I wasn't at the school at that point in time, but the people that I've spoken to said it was a huge challenge because obviously our students were pulling out a number of different devices on a daily basis, which for consistency is incredibly difficult to, one, to manage, but two, to support as well.
Awesome. So at BSAC, you have a rigorous selection process for technology, deployment, and a clear vision of implementation. It comes from leadership and also from you, Duncan. I've seen that. Can you tell us about the guiding principles of your Google for Education use?
Yeah, well, we're first and foremost, we've got a software selection policy and strategy. So I arrived at BSAC in 2024. And obviously the first role that I had was to audit all of our different softwares and to ensure that we had a really good understanding. And the one thing that was central to all of that at that point in time was obviously Workspaces Plus. And as we know, in the last sort of 18 months, there's been a huge amount of changes. But I remember being on a call before I joined the school with our partners at Learn IT. And the one thing that I did sort of emphasize was a rationale and a reason to go to Workspaces Plus. And that was really because of the higher levels of security and data governance, the interactivity in the meetings, in case there was that need to go back online, lots and lots of instructional enhancements within Google Classroom itself. So things like originality reports and that ability to keep things in the vault. But really, because the sort of investigation tools and the use of Google Admin were great, and it allowed us to really have that strategic eye on what was being used and then to delve a little bit further. In terms of the software for ourselves, we've done a huge review, not only just on our educational software, but other softwares. And our aim really is to skinny down our ed tech deck, and really the advancements in Google, especially in recent months, is allowing us to do that, which is absolutely great. So we're now focusing on that real mastery within the Google suite. And we're actually re-qualifying our teachers with their Google level 1s and their level 2s. So we're taking a much more pragmatic view about the Google ecosystem. We know it's going to be incredibly helpful for us, and that's going to basically push us forward in the next sort of 12 to 18 months and utilizing Classroom as our LMS.
Awesome. Many schools partner with us because of that. And I love the phrase that Nigel Davis, your head of secondary, mentioned. And he told me this even personally. He said something, and I want to quote him: to advance and enhance learning. And how does Google ecosystem support that theory?
Well, it's a really good question, actually. And even just yesterday, I was looking at the Google sort of BigQuery data that we get through the admin console, and that gives us a real handle on how much Google Classroom's being used, how much Gemini is being used. So we can use that data at a real top level. And then obviously in terms of a training and support perspective, we're then aiming to ensure that we can remove as many barriers as possible for adoption and to reduce the friction within the classroom. So really the idea of use of technology isn't just sort of the sole moniker of, or the sole lens in which we teach through. It's there to enhance learning. And we'll talk about some examples, but things like Gemini and Gems and Notebook have been amazing for us, really, to sort of push that forward. Things like Google Vids, we're starting to use a lot more, and the multiple language use within Gemini. So I've done some training just in the last 2 weeks, actually, with our primary Arabic teachers, and the fact that we're getting Arabic documentation. We're moving that into NotebookLM, and then it's giving us sort of a wider curriculum scope. Things like using Storybook, Read Along. And I've actually got another session next week with our inclusion department in terms of embedding NotebookLM into their sort of workflow and use of IEPs as well. So it really enables us to support all of our learners and to enhance that experience that they get in the classroom.
Awesome. Love the breadth of the technology that you've used, and I'm looking forward to continuing this journey with you guys. Can you tell us why you shifted to BYOD? Many customers move for different reasons, but bring your own device. As we know, it's not the perfect strategy, but what was the reason for BSAC as a school to move to Google Workspace for Education with Chromebooks, and what was the impact?
I think the big thing that people often talk about is removing the friction of technology. So when I teach a class, we have a set routine, which we actually introduce into the lessons, which is not with Chromebooks. So we get them to think critically, we get them to start that lesson. And then when we do obviously utilize the classroom, so the resources that are shared for that lesson, it has to be seamless. So just that ability to move the friction, everyone's on the same device, everything can be managed the same. So we've got other things that we manage through those Chromebooks, so the filtering and monitoring system as well. But it just means that without a consistent platform, you can't offer that. So you end up with lots of inequalities in terms of the IT management, which I know we're going to talk about shortly. But their ability to view and us to have a one-to-one system whereby, we have spare Chromebooks, literally swap things in, swap things out immediately. So there is no delay in the learning. There's no friction. They can literally be out of the classroom and back in within literally a few minutes if for some reason that Chromebook isn't quite working properly or they haven't charged it. So it allows us a lot of security as well. One of the biggest reasons that I talked about before was with Educational Workspaces Plus, there's so many additional security measures, and cyber security is obviously a topic that's close to everyone. But really the ability to streamline our workflow. So when you've got resources in a lesson, when you can push those out and then the teacher's got immediate visibility of that, it's amazing. And we're starting to trial class tools now as well in terms of really limiting what they can do on that Chromebook as well. So the focus is always about education rather than the distractions, which can obviously often quite happen with other devices as well.
Thank you. Now let's talk data security and streamlined operations, which we spoke about a little bit, touched on them. But I know they are very important to many schools. What are some core security measures you maximize at BSAC?
I think the thing that we do have is we've got all of our what are known as organizational units within the admin console. So what we can do is we can just make sure that even on a year group level or on a tutor group level, we can make sure that we've got those that full control really. And when we're managing over 2,000 users and over 1,000 devices, it means that we can really hone in on those important things that need to be, well, I would say piloted and then streamlined, and to make sure that the platform is safe. So I think it's quite often the things that you don't see that everyone takes for granted, which obviously is all the hard work that's done on the admin console. And we've actually just invested in a program which looks at all of our security measures within our admin console, which we've done through our Google partner. And that's been brilliant in terms of just a granular breakdown of exactly which security features need to be updated, or maybe it's simple things when people are onboarded or offboarded, and making sure that we've got that process and that procedure right as well. So without going down into the minutiae, it's just the ability to control things at a whole host of different levels.
Awesome. We've spoken a lot about technical setup and IT operations gain. But as Google for Education and my team, we basically want to talk a little bit about how Google for Education is impacting students.
Yeah, and I think the quote we've got here from Joe, who's our secondary digital lead, is really important. Joe's worked in IT, he's worked in industry before he came into teaching, so he knows the level and the versatility and the adaptability. And one of the things that he really likes is the fact that we can control things obviously on that macro level, but also on that micro level. And that's really important, the fact that we've got this sort of dynamic environment which we can utilize. And technically it allows us to do things which again, I know a lot of educators won't have access to the admin console. So it's just something which is, it happens seamlessly in the background, but obviously there needs to be those conversations. It's great when you've got somebody like Joe who's fully aware of that. So then the impact within the classroom is far greater as well.
Awesome. And preparing students for the future is absolutely essential. How have your students responded to Google Workspace for Education?
I think the biggest thing for me is if we look at the actual Chromebook and then we look at what you can do. I know, for example, my own sons joined BSAT when I did sort of 18 months ago, and one of my sons was like, "Oh, it's absolutely brilliant. I don't need to charge my Chromebook for about 3 or 4 days," which, when you've got a teenage boy, that's absolutely wonderful for them. They don't have to worry about those things. My other son's a little bit older, and therefore access to resources for him is really important. So, when he's at home, he's got all those access points into his classroom from his lesson. So like millions of kids around the world, when they're preparing for those end of year exams, then, all of that detail is in there. And we're starting to build NotebookLMs for all of our students in preparation for their exams coming up at the end of the year. So again, we've got this newer technology, and it's great because the platform can do the hard work for them, which enables them more time to actually engage with the learning cycle, and that interleaving and that response and those important things where they have misconceptions or perhaps where they're forgetting things. So again, to have that constant ability, that constant sort of sideline tutor is really great for them.
Awesome. Can you tell us more about student impacts?
Yeah, we're one of the few schools globally who do the English exam online. So what that allows over the period of time not just in the formative years of year 10 and 11, but prior to that, it enables our teachers and our students to learn in that mode. So obviously the kiosk mode or the exam mode within Google Classroom has been absolutely brilliant, because it just means that we manage that centrally, and then it enables us to, for them to be completely at one when they get into their exams. So they're using their own Chromebook, they're familiar with it, they're familiar with the sequence of events, which is really, really important for us. And things like homework as well. We've got a parental group. So we introduce Chromebooks in year 6. So that's kind of transition year from primary up to secondary. So what happens there is that obviously they don't actually take their Chromebook home in year 6. It's only used in school. So when they do go into the secondary school, we have like a transition element. So we work really closely with the pastoral team, and we have a parental working group. And so what we do is we meet with them through strategic times through the year. It's normally 4 times a year, and we're getting feedback from them as parents in terms of the support for the learner. So it might sound quite simple, but just that making sure that parents are aware of how they can support through the Guardian reports through Google Classroom. That's been something that we've rolled out, and we're working really closely with that parental group. And it just means that transition, where it's not a transition of a few weeks or a few months, we recognize that it takes time, and therefore we need to support or want to support all of our learners in their sort of formative secondary years to get those really, really good working habits, so their parents can support them throughout year 7 and 8. And then obviously by the time they get to year 9, we're fairly confident that, you know, they are well versed in using the Google Classroom. And obviously there are going to be exceptions to the rule, and you know, we're going to give those students that ongoing support. But as a general rule, it just means that I've just taken obviously 2 or 3 things there, but there's a whole host of other ways in which, you know, we see student impact in terms of how we're using Google Classroom.
Awesome. It's great to see how Google for Education has been seamless to your students. But I would like to talk a little bit about the core stakeholders, in my opinion, in the digital transformation journey, the leaders in the classroom, which are the teachers. Have the teachers had a similar experience?
Yeah, well, the quote here is from Mebs, and Mebs did a lot of great work. He was actually previously the digital lead for the secondary school. So he did a lot of training in the time prior to my arrival, and he now leads the BTEC and vocational education. So the one thing that I've talked about with Mebs is getting that consistency and how we make sure that we can continually offer support for our teachers. So it's really important that, you know, ongoing smaller group training. So for example, at the moment, I'm rolling out training for our by departments. So a load of updates happened, obviously in November, December, and then more announced at BET. So we're taking that departmental view whereby we can support all of those teachers in that department. And, you know, we'll have either working lunches, we have PD time after school, or I go into departmental meetings. And we're just making sure that the grounded principles of things like AI, which are obviously intricately woven now into the Google Classroom, we're just making sure that they realize the tools that are available and then supporting them on their journey. And we've got some whole school PD coming up in a couple of weeks' time again. And we're building that sort of, well, we've got that community of practice. So sharing all of those best practices and making sure that people not only share their good experiences, but maybe the things that they've struggled with. And I think that's really important, is that I've tried this, it doesn't quite work, I'm going to try something different. But it's having that confidence to perhaps what some people might view as fail. But obviously it's that first attempt in learning, isn't it? Where maybe it doesn't go right, and you probably learn more from when things don't quite go right. And then you can look at it more strategically and say, okay, how can we support the knowledge or the training? And that's great. I mean, our teachers use the classroom. They've got that ability to jump into documents. And I'm so excited about the new feature that was announced this week, where being able to give video and audio feedback within classroom. I think I've shared it with our staff, and they've already said this is going to be an absolute game changer, because it's you can click your fingers, and as we know, all the pedagogical research about interleaving and spacing talks about appropriate level and timeliness of feedback. And I think this for us it's a major barrier that's been removed.
Awesome. And you touched base on Gen AI. And it's not a secret that it's one of the biggest dynamic shifts in the industry. And BSAC has done a great job in adopting, understanding, and implementing Gen AI in the classroom and adapting to the teaching methods. What has been the most valuable feedback you've received from staff and students about how Gen AI has transformed learning?
I think the biggest thing for us is the ability to see it as an addition, as to, obviously we're such a well-established school that we have a huge amount of resources already, and we've got lots of experienced teachers who've been there for a really reasonable period of time. We're talking 10 to 15 years, and therefore what it's allowed us to do is to be really critical and to tweak those resources. So whether it's a student or a teacher, we've just been able to differentiate things, and just the timeliness of how you can do that. You can take one of your lessons, and then that perhaps you've got a student in there who maybe have a higher or a lower reading age, and at the click of a button, the flick of a switch, you can then provide appropriate grade level resources for them. We've had our ADAC inspection recently, and that enabled us we built a NotebookLM with all of our policies in there, with our self-evaluation plan, and that enabled all of our teachers to, rather than sitting in a hall and maybe how it would have been done 1 or 2 or 3 years ago, where you're standing and you're doing a presentation. It's like, no, here you go, here's all the information, here's an FAQ, and here's some really critical things that we need you to know, and NotebookLM is there immediately. And that's the big thing really that we're rolling out now to all departments, is to think about how and we're looking at we've started to do this. So we started to take exam questions that have come up from the mocks. We've then pursed that into NotebookLM. We've then got exam questions and individual work, and then what we're doing is identifying gaps in knowledge as well. So we're really enabling personalized learning on something which is very time sensitive, lots of feedback, but then it can give our GCSE and our A-level and our BTEC students something as a springboard towards their summer exams. And obviously we want them to be as confident as possible with that.
So can you give us a specific example? Let's switch gears from students, and I would like to have an example of how the SLT is using AI to save time.
Yeah, well, as I just touched on before, the recent ADAC inspection was a classic thing. I review our policies on a regular basis. So even when I came in 18 months ago, looking at our responsible user agreements, we're now reviewing that again. And Gemini allows us to do that really, really efficiently, really quickly. For example, 2 weeks ago, there was the DFE guidance for AI usage in schools. So I can just feed that directly into a gem that I've built, and it will give me and highlight those things which are not part of our policy at the moment. So it'll highlight and tag certain things that are really, really critical. So in essence, it saves a huge amount of time cross-referencing new policies, our existing policies and where we want to go.
That's a huge time saver for staff, you can say. What about
Yeah,
classroom level? What about classroom
classroom
level?
level.
You mentioned earlier. I want to ask specifically about history mysteries. You mentioned
Oh
that.
yeah. Okay.
Tell me
So
a bit more. Yeah.
yeah. So I teach a thing called Global Voice, and one of the things that we were doing last term was history mysteries, which were all kind of um, things which people thought of over time. So if I give you an example, like Stonehenge. So what AI enabled us to do was basically to do some really deep level research with the deep thinking tool in terms of all of the different reasons or mysteries as to why Stonehenge was there. So that enabled us to produce a great scheme of work, which the students have massively enjoyed. But what it's allowed us to do then is to say, right, okay, we've got these different mysteries that surround it. You now have to go and do the research. Well, they can do that through Gemini, but they've then got to ratify and verify the resources. So it was a really good process, and we learned a lot during that process of how our pedagogy could change. And obviously, with the drop of things like Google Vids, I was then getting my classes to produce, and it was phenomenal. It was basically like something you get on television standard, and they were producing these unbelievable reviews of Stonehenge or another mystery they'd looked at. So that's just one really nice example. I also teach social studies, so we've been looking at art within the Middle East, and that has been brilliant because they've been able to get so many different ideas which they wouldn't do normally, but they've been able to use Gemini to be able to scrape those ideas together, and it's given them so much depth to the point where we've spent a little bit longer than planned on that. But the pieces of art they've then produced, which is symbolic to the Middle East. And then we're actually doing a sort of walkthrough gallery, so as if they were at the Louvre in Abu Dhabi, and they're doing their sort of gallery template and their gallery guide as well. And I just see that the students have really bought into that, and the product of the work is absolutely stunning. And I just they've enjoyed it so much as well.
Beautiful. And Joe Noyce mentioned that the system allows you to be ready our students for the workforce.
Yeah.
Now, beyond the technical skills of using software, it's a simple software, easy software to use and adopt. And this, you gave great examples of that. But I think your school has done an amazing job at preparing students to have digital citizen skills. And I would like you to share those examples and how are you actively teaching to prepare them for the professional environments?
Yeah, we have a course called the Digital Fluency course, which we run throughout years 7 and 8. So they get one lesson, which is 55 minutes every 2 weeks. And what that allows us to do is to bring in a whole range of digital skills and to work with our students. So something that I developed previously, which was a digital compass, which was news and media literacy, which we've now added in AI, E, electronic relationships, S for security and privacy, and W for wellness. So what we do is we actually run that out across the whole digital fluency course, which then means that the really, really important skills that they need, which are those soft skills, enables us to teach. So things like self-regulation and ethical use of AI, that whole element of responsibility and stewardship, the element of collaboration. So we've just been talking about digital footprint and getting groups to collaborate and to understand what information is out there. How do they use resources? How are they critical with their thinking? Last year we did a project and we do it always in the term 3 before they go off on the summer, which is all about digital wellness and time on devices. So really it's those softer skills which some people view maybe as the harder skills as well. So we can then bring in, so we're doing the Google Skills workspaces unit. So we've purchased those, and those are being rolled out, so they all get digital, basically a digital passport as well. So we're trying to make sure that they have the specific digital skills, but also the soft skills to understand the right way or the rationale why they should be using those things as well.
Awesome. You mentioned you were talking a learn quick, slow approach to AI. How has your professional development strategy evolved from initial rollout in 2018 to the current focus on advanced tools like Gemini?
Yeah, well, that quote there is actually from Professor Rose Luckin. So I was part of it was a collaborative research group, which produced a paper that was published in the House of Lords about AI. So I bought that, and we finished that research and wrapped it up just as I arrived in Abu Dhabi, and the school were incredibly supportive of that research. And what it's meant is that we've looked at the learnings, and obviously there's lots of guidance that happens all the time. Google updates all the time, but I said since I was here that we've got to take a longer term pragmatic view, and I think the conversations with yourself and with our Google partners at Learn IT and Apps EDU, then that partnership has grown and evolved over time. So it's meant that things like we do AI breakfast, which we had a AI working group. That's a 6:45 start. It's quite an early start. We've had sort of phased rollouts of paid licenses. We've really worked hard with Learn IT to understand the landscape, and collaborated with those guys and made sure that we had a great learning lunch before the winter break. So that was not only for staff at our school, but for the wider Abu Dhabi teaching community. And I think things like that have been really important to share peer learning. And we're continuing with that working group, and we have regular discussions at SLT as well in terms of making sure that our pedagogical aims align with what we're doing. So again, we had a guest speaker last week, Dr. Carl Hendricks, who talks a lot about sort of spacing and interleaving. So I was talking to him and making sure that where we're going and what we're doing strategically is really founded within educational research. So there's lots to learn, but obviously not just a case of just rolling things out constantly, but making sure that we're really considered as to how we can roll that out across all of our staff and our students within the school.
Duncan, I want to double click on 6:45 a.m. That's a dedication by itself. And there's another dedication here that I want to share with everyone. You are sick now with a virus and you had a fever and you're talking to everyone. I love your passion. Thank you for sharing your journey and such effective strategies for the technology deployment. I really appreciate it. Now, we've covered a lot of ground today, and I hope that this has been valuable. We will take the audience questions in a moment, but let's do a quick recap. In summary, we spoke about the impact of Google for Education ecosystem on operational efficiency, especially when you come from an environment such as BYOD example. We spoke about how Google AI tools helps the staff embrace AI and students adopt AI and the impact on the pedagogy. And last but not least, we spoke about the impact on the students and how Google technologies and Google supports the school to develop a digital citizenship. And this is super important. Now, we have a lot of Chromebook samples and different models. So use this link to see how they can benefit your school. This is super important. You can start the journey from here. Amazing, different devices that are secure, simple to use, and the student can consume the Chromebook in different ways. They can consume, they can write, input and output. As you can see, there are many Chromebooks, like even you can flip them, and you see them in the classroom in different ways adopted by the students. So really, do not leave any learner behind and explore the Chromebooks. We also have a lot of learning resources available at your fingertips. Help your staff grow their skills with Google for Education Learning Center. And something I'm super excited about is the Google Certified Innovator Academy that's happening in Dubai on Tuesday, April 28th. It's in our city in the United Arab Emirates. It's between April 28th and the 30th of April. Applications are open, and I encourage you to apply before February 27th. It's the deadline. Remember that. This will help you build stronger EdTech communities and leadership skills by inviting your staff to apply to this Innovation Academy. Now, if you want to learn more about our offerings, feel free to fill out our feedback form. I'll share in a moment, and we have a lot of discussions with customers. My team is excited to talk to you about the amazing technology that can be used in the classroom. Finally, we have a great sessions coming up at edu-on-air. Be sure to sign up and not miss them. Last but not least, feedback is super important for us, and we want to hear from you. We want to adapt to your needs. Please submit this feedback form for us so that we can improve and have a continuous improvement. Thank you. Now for questions.
I think I've got one here, Maz, which is talking about, somebody's asked about gems in the classroom and an example of gems for teaching. So what we're starting to do now is, like I've said, is we're building out a gem which is they're specifically based on feedback from mock exams that have recently been done. So we're now starting to push that out into the classroom and to enable our students to identify those gaps that they've got in their teaching knowledge. So that's just one nice example. I know that some teachers are starting to use them for units, and I'm starting to use it on my social studies as well, which will enable people to interact and question more about the topic. So it's the aim of the gem really is to keep them within the topic that we're doing rather than searching outside of that topic. So I'm doing a lot of work with staff at the moment about grounded AI, which is using those resources within NotebookLM. So you can have up to 300 sources there, and then you can obviously pull that across into a gem as well. So you can use that as your knowledge source, but also you can really limit what your students are doing. So if they just want the answer in your gem, you can say, no, you're not going to get the answer, which is really good one.
It's phenomenal how we are seeing gems in the classroom and how it's being adopted in different schools. There's another question for you, which is Chromebooks at BSAC as well. What differentiates Chromebook in terms of security? And it's called device and upper security. Can you share what's your experience with Chromebooks on the security feature?
In terms of security, Maz, are you saying?
Yes, this was the question.
Okay, so we have, we basically run two different Chromebooks, just so people know. So for years 6, 7, and 8, we run a 12-inch Chromebook, which has got the flip screen on it. And then 9, 10, and 11, they go up to 14-inch, which also has the flip screen and the touch screen. In terms of security, we obviously run things on the back end, which is through the Google admin console. And so we also run an additional piece of monitoring and filtering software. So we have obviously things which our students can't access, which we input to Google admin, but then we've creating additional lists which we run through a piece of software called securely, should I say. But as I mentioned earlier on, we're actually going to be moving over, and we're piloting at the moment with a group to use class tools, which gives us that monitoring within the class as well. So there's quite a lot of movement in this space at the moment, and we're just making sure that we get it right moving forward, because obviously budgets at this time of the year, we're looking for next academic year already. So the release of those new updates are fascinating for us to make sure that we, I think, like I said, learn fast and act slow. We don't want to make a rash decision which is going to impact people in the wrong way.
Beautiful. And you said 6 and 7, 6th grade, right? Like in terms of the
so they start in primary, and it then runs 6, 7, and 8, and then obviously we change over. And the big thing there for us is that, and the beauty of it is that all that software is cloud based, so it doesn't need to have anything loaded onto the machine. It's all there, and it means that it's consistent across all the platforms that we use.
Amazing. I think we're out of time and questions. Thank you so much for joining. We are glad you could be here, and we look forward to seeing you in future sessions. Thank you, Duncan, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Maz. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.